February 20th, 1950, 6:47 a.m., Staten Island, New York. Vito Genovese walked out of his mansion to get the morning paper, and there on his doorstep were 5 packages, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, each one about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide heavy. Genovese stared at them. He wasn't expecting any deliveries. No one knew this address except his inner circle. He called his bodyguards. "Get these inside, carefully." They carried the packages into the study, set them on the floor, and that's when Genovese noticed it, the smell faint but unmistakable. Copper iron blood. His hands were shaking as he cut open the first package, and what he saw made him stumble backward, made him cover his mouth, made a man who'd killed dozens of people himself want to vomit. Inside the package was a human torso, arms and legs removed, head missing, and pinned to the chest was a note, one word handwritten: Harlem. Genovese opened the other 4 packages. Same thing, 4 more bodies, dismembered, wrapped carefully, delivered like packages from a department store. He knew immediately what this was, who this was, and he grabbed the phone with trembling hands. The call went to Italy, to Lucky Luciano, the most powerful mobster in America, the man who'd built the commission, the man who ran organized crime from exile. "Boss," Genovese said, his voice cracking, "we have a problem. The 5 men you sent to Harlem, they're on my doorstep in pieces." Silence on the other end. Then Luciano's voice, cold, flat, "Tell me everything." This is the story of what happens when the most powerful Italian mobster in American history tried to take over Harlem, and learned that some territories can't be bought, can't be threatened, can't be taken. Because Harlem belonged to Bumpy Johnson, and Bumpy Johnson didn't negotiate. Real quick before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know how far this story reaches. New York, South Carolina, wherever you are, let me know, because what happened next changed organized crime forever. Comment below. February 1950. Lucky Luciano was living in exile in Naples, Italy. He'd been deported in 1946 after spending 10 years in prison. The U.S. government made a deal. "Help us during World War II and we'll let you out early, but you can never come back to America." Luciano took the deal, got out of prison, and was immediately put on a boat to Italy. But here's the thing about Lucky Luciano. Distance didn't matter, he still ran everything. The commission, the 5 families, drug trafficking, gambling, prostitution, all of it. He had lieutenants in New York, Vito Genovese, Frank Costello, Mayor Lansky. These men followed his orders like gospel. And in February 1950, Luciano saw an opportunity. Harlem. See, Harlem was unique in the organized crime world. It was the only major territory in New York City that the Italian mob didn't control. Why? Because of one man, Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy had been running Harlem since the 1930s. Policy banks, numbers rackets, protection. He'd built an empire, and he'd kept the Italian mob out for 20 years. But Luciano thought things had changed, thought maybe Bumpy was getting old, getting soft, thought maybe it was time to finally take Harlem. So he called a meeting with Vito Genovese. "Vito, I want Harlem," Luciano said over the phone. "It's the last piece we don't control, and it's making too much money to leave in the hands of one man." Genovese was hesitant. "Boss, Bumpy Johnson isn't going to just hand it over. That man is. He's different, dangerous." Luciano laughed. "Dangerous? Vito, we run New York. We have 100 soldiers, we have politicians, we have judges. What's one black gangster going to do?" "I'm just saying, boss, maybe we approach this carefully, maybe we negotiate first." "No negotiations," Luciano said firmly. "We take it, send 5 of our best men, professional enforcers, have them set up policy banks, recruit dealers, show Harlem that the Italians are moving in. Johnson will get the message." Genovese knew better than to argue. "Yes, boss, I'll send them this week." "Good, and Vito, make sure they understand. This isn't a request, we're taking Harlem. If Johnson has a problem with that, we handle him, permanently." On February 12, 1950, 5 men arrived in Harlem. The 5 enforcers. These weren't street thugs, these were professionals. Carmine the Snake Rossi, 34 years old, former hitman, credited with at least 12 kills, cold, efficient, no emotion. Angelo Martinelli, 29 years old, explosives expert. If you needed a building blown up or a car rigged, Angelo was your guy. Sal Bianchi, 38 years old, the strategist, smart, calculated, knew how to read people, how to manipulate them. Frankie DeLuca, 26 years old, the muscle, 6'4", 240 pounds, loved hurting people. And Tommy the Blade Morty, 31 years old, knife specialist, preferred close quarters work. Rumors said he'd killed a man with a butter knife once. These 5 men checked into a hotel on 135th Street, started making moves, visiting local businesses, making offers. "We're opening a policy bank on this block," Carmine told a shop owner. "You're going to tell your customers about it, encourage them to play, and you're going to get a cut, 5%. The shop owner looked nervous. I work with Mr. Johnson, I can't." Carmine grabbed the man by the throat, slammed him against the wall. "You work for us now, understand, or we burn this place down with you inside." The shop owner nodded frantically. This happened at 6 different businesses that first week. The Italians were moving fast, aggressive, making it clear that Harlem was under new management. But here's what they didn't know. Bumpy Johnson knew they were there from day one. Bumpy's surveillance network. See, Bumpy didn't control Harlem through violence alone. He controlled it through information. He had eyes everywhere: barbers, waitresses, taxi drivers, hotel clerks, people who saw everything and reported back to him. The moment those 5 Italians checked into that hotel, Bumpy knew. He knew their names, he knew their backgrounds, he knew why they were there. His lieutenant, Willie, the Watcher Brown, came to Bumpy's apartment with the report. "Boss, we got 5 Italian guys at the Roosevelt Hotel. They've been hitting up businesses on 135th, pushing policy banks, threatening people." Bumpy was sitting in his chair, reading the newspaper, calm, like Willie had just told him the weather. "Who sent them?" Bumpy asked. "Word is they're Genovese's guys, which means Luciano approved it." Bumpy nodded slowly, folded his newspaper. "They threaten anyone we protect." "Yeah, Big Mike's shop, Rose's diner, a couple others, told them they work for the Italians now." Bumpy was quiet for a long moment, thinking, processing. "How many of them?" he finally asked. 5. "You know their names." Willie handed him a piece of paper. "Got all of them: Carmine Rossi, Angelo Martinelli, Sal Bianchi, Frankie DeLuca, Tommy Morty." Bumpy studied T. He memorized the names. Then he stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Harlem. "Let them work," he said calmly. Willie blinked. "What?" "I said let them work. Don't interfere, don't warn them. Let them set up their operations. Let them think they're succeeding." "Boss, if we wait too long." Bumpy turned around, and Willie saw that look, the one that made grown men shut up immediately. "Lucky Luciano thinks he can take Harlem with 5 men," Bumpy said quietly. "He thinks we're going to roll over, he thinks we're weak, so we're going to let him believe that, for now." "And then?" Bumpy smiled, that cold, calculating smile. "And then we're going to send him a message he'll never forget." For 5 days, Bumpy Johnson did nothing. He watched, he waited. He let the 5 Italian enforcers think they were winning. Carmine and his crew were getting confident. They'd set up 3 policy banks, recruited 15 dealers, collected protection money from a dozen businesses. And there was no resistance, no pushback, no Bumpy Johnson. "This is easier than I thought," Frankie said on their 5th night. They were having dinner at a restaurant on 138th Street, celebrating. "I told you," Sal said. "Johnson's old, past his prime, he knows he can't fight us." Angelo raised his glass. "To Harlem, the newest jewel in Luciano's crown." They all drank, laughed, made plans for expansion. None of them noticed the man sitting in the corner, reading a newspaper, not eating, just watching. That man was one of Bumpy's people, and he was counting, memorizing, reporting. That night, Willie came to Bumpy's apartment again. "They're feeling comfortable, boss, getting sloppy. All 5 of them were at Paolo's restaurant tonight, drinking, talking loud." "Where are they staying?" "Still at the Roosevelt, 5th floor, rooms 501 through 505, all in a row." Bumpy nodded. "How many exits does that hotel have?" 3, front entrance on 135th, side entrance on Lenox, fire escape on the west side. "Security?" "One guy at the front desk, night shift, falls asleep around 2 a.m. every night." Bumpy smiled. "Tomorrow night, 2:30 a.m., bring 12 men, good men, people who won't talk." Willie understood immediately. "You want all 5. All 5, no noise, no witnesses, clean." "And if they resist?" Bumpy's expression didn't change. "They won't get the chance." February 17th, 1952, 30 a.m. The Roosevelt Hotel was quiet. The night clerk was asleep at the desk, head down, snoring softly. 12 men moved through the side entrance. Silent, professional, they'd done this before. Bumpy Johnson wasn't with them. He was back at his apartment, playing chess against himself, waiting for the phone call. The 12 men moved up the stairs. No elevator, too loud. They reached the 5th floor. Willie gave hand signals. 3 men to room 501, 3 to 502. The pattern continued. They picked the locks, opened the doors simultaneously. Inside each room, an Italian enforcer was sleeping, dreaming of their success in Harlem, dreaming of the money they'd make. They never woke up screaming. Bumpy's men were too good for that, quick, efficient, silent. Within 3 minutes, all 5 Italian enforcers were unconscious, tied up, gagged. They carried them down the fire escape, into waiting cars, and drove them to a warehouse on the edge of Harlem. Bumpy was already there when they arrived. The 5 Italians woke up one by one, tied to chairs, gags in their mouths, confused, terrified. Bumpy Johnson stood in front of them, hands in his pockets, expression calm, like he was about to discuss the weather. "Gentlemen," Bumpy said quietly, "welcome to Harlem, real Harlem, not the Harlem you've been playing in for the last 5 days, the Harlem that belongs to me." Carmine was struggling against his ropes, eyes wild, trying to say something through the gag. Bumpy walked over to him, removed the gag. "You can't do this," Carmine gasped. "Do you know who we work for? Luciano will." Bumpy put the gag back in. "I know exactly who you work for, that's why you're here." He walked back to the center of the room, addressed all 5 of them. "Lucky Luciano thinks he can take Harlem with 5 men. He thinks I'm old, thinks I'm weak, thinks I'll just hand over 20 years of work because he sent some tough guys to scare me." Bumpy shook his head slowly. "But that's the problem with men like Luciano. They forget something important. Fear doesn't work in Harlem, respect does, and you can't buy respect. You can't threaten respect. You earn it." He turned to Willie. "You have the cameras." Willie nodded, held up a Polaroid camera. "Good," Bumpy said. "Take pictures. I want Luciano to see their faces. I want him to see what happens when you disrespect Harlem." What happened next in that warehouse, nobody knows exactly. Bumpy's men never talked about it, not to their families, not to their friends, not to anyone. But 3 days later, 5 packages arrived at Vito Genovese's doorstep. Vito Genovese called Lucky Luciano from a payphone. He couldn't use his home phone, couldn't risk anyone hearing this conversation. "Boss, we need to pull out of Harlem, immediately." Luciano's voice was ice. "Explain." "The 5 men you sent, they're dead, all of them. Johnson sent them back to me in pieces." Silence on the line. "Boss, are you there?" "How many pieces?" Luciano asked quietly. 5 packages, 1 for each man, dismembered, professional, and there was a note, just 1 word: Harlem. More silence. "Boss, Johnson is making a statement. He's saying Harlem is off limits, that if we push this, he'll go to war, and after seeing what he did to our guys, I don't think we can win that war." Luciano took a deep breath. How clean was it? What do you mean? The police, are they investigating? Any witnesses? Any evidence linking it to Johnson? Nothing. It's like our guys just disappeared. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. Johnson has the entire neighborhood protecting him. Luciano was quiet for a long time. Genovese could hear him thinking, processing. Finally, Luciano spoke. Pull out, immediately, shut down any operations we started, and tell everyone, tell all the families. Harlem is Bumpy Johnson's territory. Nobody touches it, not us, not anybody. Yes, boss. And Vito, call Johnson. Tell him I want to meet, face to face. Genovese was shocked. Boss, you're in Italy. You can't come back to America. I know, tell him to come to Havana, Cuba, neutral ground. I want to talk to this man. Anyone who can do what he just did. I want to meet him. 2 weeks later, Bumpy Johnson flew to Havana, Cuba. They met at a private villa overlooking the ocean. Just the two of them. No bodyguards, no witnesses. Lucky Luciano was sitting on the terrace when Bumpy arrived, smoking a cigar, looking out at the water. Mr. Johnson, Luciano said without turning around, thank you for coming. Mr. Luciano, Bumpy sat down in the chair across from him. They sat in silence for a moment, two of the most powerful criminals in America, face to face for the first time. You know why I wanted to meet you? Luciano finally asked. I can guess. Luciano turned to look at him. I underestimated you. That was a mistake, a bad one, and I want to apologize. Bumpy raised an eyebrow. Lucky Luciano didn't apologize to anyone, ever. I thought Harlem was just another territory, Luciano continued. I thought you were just another local boss. I was wrong. What you've built there, the loyalty, the organization, the control, that's rare, that's special. Harlem isn't a territory, Bumpy said quietly. It's a home, my home, and you don't send soldiers into a man's home and expect him to welcome them. Luciano nodded. I understand that now. What you did to my men, that was a message, and I received it, loud and clear. So why am I here? Because I want to make a deal, not to take Harlem, but to work with you. The commission controls the rest of New York. You control Harlem. We stay out of your way, you stay out of ours. And if we need to do business together, we do it with respect, as equals. Bumpy studied him. Equals. You proved you deserve a seat at the table. What you did took skill, took courage, took the kind of ruthlessness that I respect. So yes, equals. Bumpy leaned back in his chair, thought about it. I have conditions, he said finally. Name them. 1. No Italian operations in Harlem, period. No policy banks, no drug dealers, no prostitution, nothing. Harlem is mine. Agreed. 2. If any of your people hurt anyone in Harlem, I handle it. Not you, not the police, me. Luciano hesitated. That's asking a lot. That's the price. Luciano nodded slowly. Agreed. Anything else? 3. We keep this arrangement quiet. No announcements, no public handshakes. The world doesn't need to know we're working together. Why? Because I protect Harlem by keeping enemies confused. If they think I'm alone, they underestimate me, just like you did. Luciano smiled, actually smiled. You're smart, smarter than I gave you credit for. And one more thing. What? If you ever send men into Harlem again, I won't send them back in pieces. I'll send them back in ashes. Understand? Luciano looked at Bumpy Johnson, saw something in his eyes, a coldness, a certainty. This man wasn't bluffing. This man would burn the world down to protect Harlem. Understood, Luciano said. You have my word. The commission will never interfere in Harlem again. They shook hands, and that handshake changed organized crime in New York forever. Word spread fast in the underworld. Bumpy Johnson had met with Lucky Luciano, and Lucky Luciano had backed down. The most powerful mobster in American history, the man who'd built the commission, the man who controlled judges, politicians, police chiefs. He'd looked at Bumpy Johnson and said, "You win." The 5 packages became legendary, a cautionary tale told in every mob family in America. You know what happened when Luciano tried to take Harlem. No, what? He sent 5 guys. Bumpy Johnson sent them back in 5 boxes. People started calling Bumpy the King of Harlem, not just the boss, the king. Because kings don't negotiate with invaders. Kings don't share their kingdoms. Kings defend what's theirs with absolute ruthlessness. And Bumpy Johnson had proven he was willing to do whatever it took to protect Harlem. For the next 18 years, until Bumpy died in 1968, Harlem remained independent. The Italian mob controlled Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island. But Harlem belonged to Bumpy Johnson. No Italian operations, no interference, just a mutual understanding. You respect Harlem, and Harlem respects you. Lucky Luciano never spoke publicly about the 5 packages, never acknowledged what happened, but in private conversations with other mob bosses, he'd say the same thing. Bumpy Johnson is not to be touched. He's earned his territory, and anyone who goes after him answers to me. That was the highest compliment Luciano could give: protection, respect, acknowledgement. Vito Genovese kept the photographs, the Polaroids Willie took in that warehouse. He showed them to new recruits, young soldiers who thought they were tough. You see these men, Genovese would say, they were professionals, killers, experienced, and Bumpy Johnson took them apart like they were nothing. So when I tell you to stay out of Harlem, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, because I don't want to receive another delivery. The photographs were eventually destroyed, too dangerous to keep, but people who'd seen them never forgot the looks on those men's faces, the terror, the realization that they'd made a fatal mistake. Bumpy's perspective. Years later, a reporter asked Bumpy about the incident, about the 5 Italians who disappeared. "I don't know what you're talking about," Bumpy said calmly. "There are rumors, stories about what you did. Rumors are just stories people tell when they're bored." But Luciano stopped trying to take Harlem after. Bumpy cut him off. Luciano stopped because he's smart. He understood that Harlem isn't a territory you conquer, it's a community you earn the right to protect. And you can't earn that right with threats, with violence, with fear. You earn it with respect, with loyalty, with sacrifice. Is that why Harlem protected you? Why nobody talked to the police? Bumpy smiled. "Harlem protected me because I've spent 20 years protecting Harlem. It's that simple. You give respect, you get respect. You give loyalty, you get loyalty. And if someone threatens your family, your community, your home, you do whatever it takes to protect it. Even if that means sending a message so clear that nobody ever threatens your home again." The reporter never published that interview, too dangerous, too explicit. But he kept the notes, and years after Bumpy died, he shared them, and the story spread. The story of how Bumpy Johnson taught Lucky Luciano that some places can't be conquered, some men can't be intimidated, and some communities are worth dying for. Here's what makes this story important. It's not about violence, it's not about revenge, it's about power, real power. Lucky Luciano had money, had soldiers, had connections, had the law on his side. But Bumpy Johnson had something Luciano couldn't buy. He had a community that loved him, trusted him, would die for him. And when you have that, you're untouchable. The 5 packages were a message, but not just to Luciano, to everyone. You can't take what isn't for sale, and Harlem will never be for sale. That message echoed through organized crime for decades, long after Bumpy died, long after Luciano died. Because power isn't about how many men you have, it's about how many people believe in you. Bumpy Johnson didn't need an army, he had Harlem, and Harlem was more powerful than any mob family in America. So here's my question for you. If someone threatened your home, your family, your community, how far would you go to protect it? Would you negotiate? Would you compromise? Or would you send a message so brutal, so unforgiving, that nobody would ever threaten you again? Think about that. Because Bumpy Johnson answered that question in February 1950, and his answer was so definitive that the most powerful mobster in American history backed down. That's not just power, that's legend. If this story hit different, you know what to do. hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you the real stories, the brutal truths about power, respect, and what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Drop a comment, tell me, what do you think happened in that warehouse? What message was so powerful that it stopped Lucky Luciano in his tracks? And hit the bell because next week, we're diving into another legendary story. The night Frank Lucas tried to take over Bumpy Johnson's territory and learned why Bumpy was called the King of Harlem. Remember, power isn't about violence, it's about respect, and nobody commanded more respect than Bumpy Johnson. This is history they don't teach, but it's history that matters. See you next time.